Likutei Sichos, Chelek Chavtes, volume 29, the second Sicha of Parshas V'eschanan. This Sicha will explain the idea of Maglim Rabbi Imoy, that the halacha is that one who kills unintentionally and is therefore compelled to go to Golus, he's exiled to the city of refuge, that you have to send his teacher, his master, together with him. The Rabbi will explain this idea, how it applies to our lives in our service of Hashem, and this is based on a halacha in the Rambam. So just as a quick introduction, to be familiar with the concepts in the Sicha, first of all, the idea of Orei Mikla, the city of refuge. So first of all, literally, the Torah says it's a city of refuge because when someone kills someone else, the next of kin, or the Torah refers to him as the Goyel Hadam, literally the redeemer of the blood that was spilled, has a right to kill him if he is outside of the bounds of the cities of refuge. You know, the Torah gives him a place where he can go and be safe from the Goyel Hadam. However, on a deeper level, this in fact is actually a form of punishment. It's considered to be a golus, like he's exiled there. That's how the Torah says it. Why is he exiled there? In other words, what did he do? He killed unintentionally. Why would we penalize him? Why would he have to, why is he deserving of a punishment? Well, the answer is that although he didn't do it intentionally, but still the fact that something so terrible, something so disastrous as taking a life of another Jew could happen through him, says that this is something, that he has some severe deficiency in his soul or in his being that allowed this to happen through him. And therefore for that, he needs to have an atonement, he needs to have a correction. Finally, the book of the Rambam, the Sefer Mishnah Torah, the Rambam's monumental work on halacha, which covers all the halachas of the Torah, as the Rambam himself spells out in his introduction, that this book is Sefer Halachis Halachis. That means it's exclusively halachis, to the extent that the Rambam doesn't even write reasons or sources for his decisions for his psakim in this Sefer. And another thing that we know that the Rambam wrote it, and we have it in the original language the Rambam wrote it in, which is very, very precise, very, very exact. Let's go into the Sikha. So the verse says that if somebody kills somebody unintentionally, that he should escape, he should run to one of these cities of refuge, and he shall live. So we learn from this in the Gemara. The Gemara says, what is this word v'choy, quote unquote, and he shall live, teach us? Says the Gemara, Talmid Shegala Maglin Rabbi Yimai. A student that has been exiled to one of these cities of refuge, you exile with him his teacher, his master. Shenamar, because it says, V'choy, and he shall live. Says the Gemara, what does that teach us? That you should do for him something that gives him life. Since he's a student of Torah, this gives him life. Now the Rambam, quoting this Gemara, Lahalocha, he paskins, he writes as follows. A Talmud, a student that was exiled to the cities of refuge, you force his teacher, his master, to go with him, because it says, V'choy. He quotes almost verbatim the words of the Gemara, that you should make something for him that he should live. Then the Rambam adds, please take note of this, and the life of Chaye Baalei Chochma, the life of masters of wisdom, Umevaksheha, and those that seek it, without learning Torah, is considered like death. The question is, after quoting verbatim, almost, what the Gemara said, and the halacha, and the reason, what exactly is the purpose? What is the Rambam out to explain with this addition of the Rambam? Now, perhaps, on a basic level, we can say that perhaps this is coming to answer an obvious question that pops up. And that is, how is it possible to compel his teacher, his master, to go now and be uprooted from his place and to be exiled only for the purpose of his student learning Torah? Especially especially considering that according to what happened, as we said in the introduction, this student is not really a good student. He's not such a big tzaddik. He's not such a student of the Torah. The fact that, by virtue of the fact that what happened through him. So why would we compel somebody to uproot their whole life and to live now in a foreign city just for the sake that this person should learn Torah? The answer, therefore, perhaps you can say, this is what the Rambam is saying. That since the life of a student of Torah, a Baalei Chochmah, as he says, the masters of wisdom, or those who seek it, is not a life, in other words, that this becomes almost like a matter of life and death. Oh, in such a case, then of course it makes sense to compel his teacher, his master, to be forced to go with him and dare to teach him Torah, because otherwise it's a matter of life and death, and you don't want to endanger his life. Now, what is the source for this? Because there's a verse in Kohelet, Shlomo HaMelech writes, HaChochma techaya ba'aleh, that wisdom preserves or enhances the life of those who possess it. Now, we do need analysis, however, even after giving this answer in the words of the Rambam. Because it comes out according to the Rambam that, at least if we look at the surface of it, on the face of it, that is, that only a student who, quote, his entire life is Torah, only such a student would we compel his teacher, his master, to be exiled alongside with him. That's what it would seem, because that's the reason that he's giving, because his whole life is Torah. But from the words of the Gemara, and in fact from the words of the Rambam himself in the initial phase of this halacha, it comes out that this is halacha that goes across the board and is applicable to all kinds of students, not only to the one that's in the highest standing, that his whole life is Torah. Moreover, in conclusion of this halacha, if you look in the source in the Gemara says, quote, that from here, the Chachamim, the sages, from here they concluded that a person should always be sure not to teach students that are not fit. And Rashi explains, because if you teach a student that's not fit, then what's going to happen is eventually the sins, the deficiencies of that student are going to bring his teacher himself to have to later be exiled potentially. So what comes out from this? That what kind of student are we talking about? Or certainly is included in this halacha. Even a student that's not fit, that now this happened, look what happened, and now we're compelling his master to go into Galus. So again, the question, just to summarize, is how does the Rambam give this as a reason to say, oh, because the life of the masters of wisdom and those who seek it is not a life without Torah, which seems to imply that we're talking about a student at the highest standing, when in fact this is more likely related to a student that's on the lowest standing. Now, the Rebbe says that the Rugged Shaver Goyen does give some kind of statement, some kind of explanation to this, saying that this is not the actual halachic reason, so to speak, that which the Rambam is saying. Rather, he says it's some kind of spiritual thing, he says. He suggests his own interpretation, but the Rebbe immediately knocks this down, and the Rebbe says, no. Remember, the book of the Rambam, as the Rambam himself introduces in his introduction, and he says this is a book which is exclusively halachas, and remember, the Rambam never gives reasons. This is one of those exceptions where he seems to be giving a reason. In fact, that tells us that he's not just giving a reason, he's actually stating the halacha, he's actually clarifying the halacha. So you can't just dismiss it by saying, oh, it's just a kind of spiritual idea. No, it has to fit in with halacha. So the question is, what is that? Says the Rebbe, if we take a closer look at these two descriptions, Baalei Chochma u'Mevaksheha, the masters of wisdom and those who seek it. The question is, it doesn't seem to go hand in hand. It seems like they're two different people. How do you put them together? You say Baalei Chochma, people who already acquired wisdom, as if, so to speak, it's theirs. In fact, we do find an expression to this, as it says in the Tehillim, Ubetoirasai Yehege, that one will study diligently his own Torah. What do you mean his own Torah? It's Hashem's Torah. But the idea is that when you reach such a level that you master it, it becomes, so to speak, as if it's yours. But that's somebody who's Baalei Chochma, he masters wisdom, he's somebody who's like acquired it already. It becomes one and part of him. Versus Mevaksheho, those who seek it. The definition of the word, those who seek it, means that they don't have it yet. So how does the Rambam bunch it together and say, this is for those who, a student who is Baal Chachma Umevaksheh, one who is a master of wisdom and an owner of wisdom, so to speak, and those who seek it. How do they go hand in hand? It says the Rebbe, therefore, we're compelled to come to a conclusion that perhaps we need to read it when it says Baalei Chachma Umevaksheha, and those who seek it. We know in the rules of grammar of Torah, sometimes the word and can mean or. And says the Rebbe, that's how we're supposed to read it here. The ones who are masters of Chachma or those who seek it. That the Rambam is saying that you have to compel, you compel the master, the teacher of this student who's going into Gullus, that he also has to go into Gullus to teach a student. For those who are Baalei Chachma, those who already acquired wisdom, those who are full-fledged students of Torah. Of course, we still need to explain how did it happen through him, but that okay. Or at least those, or, notice the word or, not u and, but or those who seek it, those who seek to become Baalei Chachma, to become students of Torah, masters of Torah. And that applies to each and every one. Because the mere fact that his Rebbe, that Rabbi, his teacher, his master, accepted him as a student, means, by virtue of the fact that he accepted him, that he saw something in him, even if he wasn't such a fit student, even if he wasn't yet a master of Chachma, a master of Torah, he hasn't fully acquired Torah, but at least he saw in him some promising qualities that he at least is seeking Torah. And therefore, he has an obligation, quote, to do something for him, meaning he's compelled to go and help him, that he should have a means of life, because this is what he's seeking in life. And this idea of that the master, the teacher, being compelled to go out there with him, to do for him, that he should, quote unquote, have life, he should have what he's seeking, is not only based on the moment itself, meaning the moment of the occurrence of this mishap, or when he is being sentenced to go to Gullus. No, we take into account the future, meaning what the potential is. We don't look at what he's now, we look at what he can become. And that's what we're saying, that since he's seeking it, even on the most elementary level, his master, his teacher is compelled, has obligation to go out with him to make sure that he gives him this experience of learning Torah, that he should be able to go from Mevaksher, from those who seek it, to become a Baal Chachma. Says the Rebbe, one of the obvious lessons from this, when a person starts to really evaluate themselves, and they come to the conclusion that perhaps, God forbid, we're in a state of Talmid She'eni Hakum, as the Talmud describes a Talmud, a student that is not fit, and Chas v'Shalom, this can bring us to despair. The solution for this is Aseh L'Charav. You should have a teacher, you should have a master, you should have a guide. And this Rav will already work on the situation, and it'll help you become, from those who seek it, because obviously if you're bothered by it, it means you seek it, to become a Talmud Hagun, a proper student of Torah, or moreover, a Baal Chachma, a master of Chachma. But either way, even if the person is in the worst level, most decrepit level possible, but at least if you have that basic desire at some level, you're a Mevaksher, you seek it, then certainly your Rebbe has to go in Golus with you to teach you, and certainly he'll bring you to a higher level. This is in a person's personal situation. And in a person's avoida ruchnis, in our avoida of Hashem, this whole idea of maglim rabbi imoy, that you force the teacher, the master, to be exiled, every single yid is like a Talmud, a child of Hashem. We say it every day. V'chol banayich limudi Hashem. Every child of Hashem is a student of Hashem. And therefore, even chas v'shalom, if someone sinned, and they became a Talmud she'eni hagam, quote unquote, an unfit Talmud. But since we are all Baalei Chachma. We are all, essentially, we are all masters of Chachma. I'm sorry, because we weren't masters of Chachma, forgive me, because we weren't masters of Chachma. Because if one is a master of Chachma, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, one who's connected to the true source of Chachma is not capable of sinning. So the virtue of the fact that one sinned shows and proves that the person is not about Chachma, but still, Hashem, so to speak, is forced to be with us. Maglin Rabbi Imoy. Why so? Because Hashem has to be there to make sure that we live, to save us from the Goyal Hadam, to save us from the, quote, the Redeemer of the blood, the Avenger of the blood. Who is the Avenger of the blood? So we know the Gemara says that the Yetzer Hara actually has three roles. He wears three hats. First is the Yetzer Hara. He convinces the person, he instigates him to do the Avera. Later he becomes the Satan who starts now to prosecute the person. And later, Chas v'Shalom, he becomes himself the Malach HaMaves, the implementer of the verdict. So Hashem is there to save us from him. But since the person, since a person is in the category of Mevakshe Hashem, since a person is in the category, every single Yid is certainly in the category of those who seek Hashem, regardless of who the Yid is, but deep down, every single Yid, by virtue of our nature, we are seekers of Hashem. As the Alter Rebbe said, that every single Yid, nishar kena, nishar vil, zaynifet von Eibishter, that every single Yid is not capable, nor does he have any desire to be separate from Hashem. Sometimes it's covered up, sometimes it's concealed. But the fact is, it's there. So what does it tell us? That even though he's not a Baal Chachma, by virtue of the fact that he sinned, but certainly Hashem goes in Golus with him. Hashem is together with him, with each individual, regardless of their standing, because the fact is that deep down, every single Yid is Mevakshe Hashem, is a seeker of Hashem. So if he's not a Baal Chachma, at least he's a seeker of Hashem. And moreover, if the Yid is actively exhibiting his desire, he has an active interest of being close to Hashem, then certainly Hashem is there with him, because it's not dormant, it's active. Now, in the general sense, how it applies to all of Klal Yisrael, this idea, says when we are in Golus, we're in Golus. And Chas v'Shalom, it's possible sometimes that a person should fall into despair and say, May I in Yova Yezri? How are we going to get out of here? For this we have the promise that when we are in Golus, when a Yid is in Golus, a student is in Golus, V'chol b'nai yechumid Hashem, every single Yid is a child of Hashem. Maglin Rabbi Yimoy, that the Rebbe, the master, is also going in Golus with the person. And his Rabbi means the master, can't just be there in Golus in an aloof manner, that the student should live, let's say, in the slums of Golus, and the master will live somewhere in the better neighborhood, so to speak. No, the halacha is that he has to be there together with the student. So wherever we are, in whatever stage of Golus, in whatever situation, Hashem is there with us in that same spot. In other words, Shchinta begalusa, the Shechina is in Golus. Now, if the Shechina is in Golus, it's certain that the Shechina wants to get out of here. So therefore, this brings us not only that we shouldn't have despair, but we should have the greatest of hopes that certainly Hashem will do it, and not just do it, but in a speedy manner, a matter of achishena, that we will very, very speedily get out of Golus, because since he's here with us as our Rabbi, therefore he wants to certainly get out of here, so he's going to take us out with him.